Hi, welcome back to my channel. Now, 2023 is the 60th anniversary of Doctor Who, my favourite TV show ever since I was a wee bairn, when my mother would park me on the sofa and she'd go off into the kitchen and make me fish finger sandwiches, and I'd sit there absolutely terrified out of my mind, watching, Pyramids of Mars with Egyptian mummies wandering through English woodsides, or The Brain of Morbius, or Seeds of Doom with some pod cracking open and some tendril coming out to feed itself on Sarah's arm. If you're of that generation, you'll know what I'm talking about. Now, I've done Doctor Who content on this channel before, and I'm just trying to gauge actually whether there's much interest. I wanted to do a series of specials this year, going through each era of Doctor Who, picking out my best and worst, my favourite story, my least favourite story, the most underrated story, the most overrated story. I'm just trying to gauge really whether there's any interest in the channel. My Doctor Who stuff hasn't had much pickup, and I wondered if there was any Doctor Who fans out there who'd like me to do that. So let me know in the comments below if that's the case. Anyway, one of the things you always get in a big anniversary like this is a poll. Doctor Who magazine will do a poll of all the Doctor Who fans around the world about their favourite stories, their favourite doctors and everything. But they used to do this about every 5 years or so, actually. But they haven't done one for ages. And I think I know the reason, actually. One reason is that Colin Baker got a bit upset about it because he was always voted as the worst Doctor. And he got a bit peevish about it. And I think he fell out with Doctor Who magazine about it. And secondly, also his first story, The Twin Dilemma, kept being voted as the worst story of all time. And I think he got a bit of a complex about it. And secondly, I wonder whether, I suspect that the series hasn't been terribly popular in the ratings in recent years, neither in the Capaldi or the Jodie Whittaker era. I wonder if they're worried that if they did a poll, the more recent stories wouldn't fare so well against the older stories. I don't know, perhaps that's me being a bit suspicious, a bit paranoid. Anyway, I thought I'd do my own. I thought I'd put my own ranking of all the Doctor Who stories up online. I did this because I did a marathon of the series recently. I went right back to Unearthly Child. It was the first time I'd ever done this. I like to call it the pilgrimage, right? So you go back to the start, you go back to Unearthly Child in the William Hartnell era, and you come forward right to the present. And I went right to the end of the Capaldi era, and that's where I stopped watching for various reasons. I haven't watched Doctor Who in recent years. I've kind of lost interest in it. And so I did this marathon, and while I did it, I kept a running tally of, sort of running ranking of the stories. And that's what I'm going to give you today. So if you click on the link below, you'll find this ranking of the series on my website. A few little notes on it. When I was doing the marathon, I really recommend the marathon to everybody, every fan. If you've never done it, please do it. It's so interesting. It tells you so much about the development of the series. And I stretched it out over about 5 years so that I had more of the feeling of watching a series develop and watching the different eras, And it changed my mind about a lot of things. One thing I realised, perhaps unfortunately, was that the Doctor Who that I really care about is the old stuff. I'm very old school. I'm interested in the 60s and 70s. The first 4 Doctors, William Hartnell, Patrick Troughton, John Pertwee and Tom Baker. That's really where my heart is, and that's really real Doctor Who to me, if you like. For me, Doctor Who ends with The Horns of Nimon, which unfortunately is the worst story up to that point. But anyway, there it is. That's where sort of classic Doctor Who really finishes. And what comes after it, the John Nathan Turner stuff and the new series stuff, I instead of looking at it negatively, I look at it as a great big DVD extra. So things like Kaiser Androzani and Human Nature are big DVD extras. That's how I look at it. But my heart really is with the 60s and 70s, so I'm very old school, and you'll see that in the list. Watching through Doctor Who from the beginning, I fell in love all over again with the Hartnell era. The one era of Doctor Who where I think every single story has got something going for it. There's not a single dud in the entire era. I love that era of the programme. I find it so diverse and interesting and ambitious. I love it to pieces. So every story's got something, whether it's a good character or some good atmosphere or a good idea. I liked the Troughton stuff as much as I ever did. I had a bit of a wobble with the John Pertwee era, I have to say. I love season 7. It's brilliant television, all 25 episodes of it. It's not really Doctor Who. It's more Doctor Who playing at being some kind of, thriller series from the 60s, like The Avengers or Doomwatch. But it's so good that you don't really care. The Barry Litz and Terence Dicks stuff, perhaps heretically, I'm going to suggest, is a bit too cosy and formulaic. It's a bit too, this'll do, this'll do. It's half an hour on a Saturday night, get it out, brilliant, job done. And sometimes it leaves me a bit underwhelmed. There's some great stories in there. I love Curse of Peladon and The Time Warrior, The Green Death, Carnival of Monsters. But overall, I find it's a bit baggy, the John Pertwee era. I was a bit worried that watching it through all over again, the Hinchcliffe era might go down in my estimation. I didn't need to worry. It is absolutely brilliant and still the best era of Doctor Who by a mile. But what really cheered me up was I still enjoyed the Tom Baker era after Hinchcliffe era was over. I find that I really love the Tom Baker era up until the end of The Key to Time. Seasons 15 and 16 are fine by me. They're not as good as the 3 previous seasons, but Tom is still wonderfully entertaining as the Doctor and still rich in inventiveness and intelligence. And I think that The Key to Time is very, very underrated. I don't think it's really seen as it is, that it's a very inventive new era of Doctor Who that tries a completely different formula, just like Season 7 had done, and Season 7 gets lots of praise. But Season 16 doesn't, because people don't like the formula, which is a kind of sophisticated romantic comedy, really. Like Romancing the Stone or something, Doctor Who style. And a lot of fans don't like that, so they dismiss it, without actually really admitting that it's just as ambitious and different in its style as any other type of Doctor Who. After that, I think that Tom Baker gets a bit too up himself, I admit it, even though I still love him to pieces. And Season 17 is very baggy, and then Season 18 is very cold and wooden. I've never liked John Nathan Turner as a producer. I know it's fashionable these days to say that John Nathan Turner was he's one of us, this poor little guy fighting the BBC. No, he wasn't. He was a terrible producer who should have been producing light entertainment. And he changed Doctor Who, I think, into something different. He changed it into a kind of cult teenage series for young fans, instead of being a family series for everyone. And I think it did suffer as a result. And watching the marathon through this time, one of the saddest conclusions I came to was that the Peter Davison era, in its way, is as much a failure as the Colin Baker and Sylvester McCoy eras. And it's very difficult for me to admit that, because in many ways Peter Davison was my Doctor. I think, between the ages of 10 and 13 is the best time to be a Doctor Who fan, because you're young enough to still be caught up in the wonder of it all, but you're old enough to understand the plots and the ideas. And I was a massive Doctor Who fan at that age, and that's when Peter Davison became the Doctor. But looking back on it, Davison's Doctor is boring and weak and badly characterised, and a lot of the stories are very poor. So that was a bit of a shame, really. I did have a slightly better impression of the Sylvester McCoy era this time round, an era that I've never got on with. When I was a teenager, I hated it. I thought it was a bit of youth TV trying to capture the youth audience with this, this kind of baseball bat wielding teenager who goes wicked. Oh, save me. I hated it. Looking back on it, going through it in the marathon, look, it was a different creative direction, and they were trying to do something new with the series, and they were trying to revive the characterisation of the Doctor as something mysterious that should be at the centre of the programme. I appreciate that. But they still made a programme that, again, is not really Doctor Who to me. It has more of the feel of one of those kind of weird cult series that you used to get on ITV, like Sky or something, or a kind of more youth-orientated version of the Tomorrow People, something like that. It's not really my style. The new series, watching it again, it's very well made. It's very well acted. The main actors they get to play the regulars are excellent. It's a pleasurable Saturday night fun series to watch. I have no affection for it. I have no nostalgia for it or affection for it, and that really does disturb the rankings that you'll see down below. I fell in love with Christopher Eccleston all over again. I think he was a very bold choice as the Doctor, and I think it comes off, and I think he's great. And that season, even though the individual episodes slightly weaken on a rewatch, overall, it's the sum of its parts, and I think that season is really, really strong, and I still really enjoy it. The David Tennant era, sadly, I don't find very rewatchable. In fact, I find it really bland. It's a bit like the John Pertwee era in the sense that the producers came up with a formula a kind of rinse and repeat, cosy, formulaic formula that worked and that appealed to a mass audience, and didn't really stretch it in terms of originality or ideas. And I find that a bit boring. It's not really my style. There's some good episodes in there like Human Nature and Blink and Midnight, but overall I find it a bit weak. It doesn't repay reviewing. The first season of Matt Smith is great, not so much because the individual episodes are good, but because the TARDIS team, Matt Smith, Karen Gillan, Arthur Darvill, and Riversong, Alex Kingston, are terrific. One of the best TARDIS teams in the history of the series. I love them to pieces. But I tell you something, after the first 12 stories, The Impossible Astronaut, Day of the Moon, after that era falls off a cliff. And after all, I think Doctor Who does. I think really, from that point onwards, I just don't enjoy the series. When I did the marathon, I kept watching through to the end, but it was grueling. I don't know why I did it, really. And I realised, looking back, that really I should have stopped watching Doctor Who round about A Good Man Goes to War, which is where I think the series jumps the shark. Controversial. I think that's where Stephen Moffat stops getting away with it, really. And if I'd stopped watching there, I'd perhaps have a more refreshed attitude towards the series now. But as it is, I've completely lost interest in the series. I've completely snapped, and I have no interest in what's happening in Doctor Who now. I know a lot of people are interested in David Tennant and Catherine Tate coming back. I couldn't care less. I have no interest in watching these specials. I have no interest in watching the Ncuti Gatwa stuff. It's all gone. Not in a sort of nasty, I hate them kind of way, but it's just dissipated. I have no interest in the series anymore. Perhaps if I'd stopped watching back then, I'd be refreshed now, but I sat through those last 5 years of Stephen Moffat, and God, it was grueling. It was really grueling. It picked up a little bit in that last season of Capaldi when it got a bit more fun again, and you got the monks and all that sort of stuff. But it was too little too late for me, and I stopped watching with Twice Upon a Time. So this is a ranking of all the stories from An Unearthly Child to Twice Upon a Time. The way I've done it is I haven't just gone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've put them in blocks of 10, right, down to 150, and then blocks of 30. That's just how I like to do it. Because I can't be bothered ranking the lower ones. It just gets tedious. Anyway, I hope you find it of interest. There's probably stories there that near the top and you're thinking, what's he put that near the top for? And other stories, near the bottom, which are probably masterpieces to you. Let me know. I'd be interested to hear your comments. No abuse, please. Come on, it's the anniversary. Let's have some fun. But let me know your comments and also, are you interested in seeing more Doctor Who content on this channel? Or otherwise, I'll just go back to talking about cult movies. Anyway, whatever you do, have a great anniversary this year, and I'll see you later.